Hello, my name is Arnulfo from Monterrey, Mexico, and you can see some of my credentials and accreditations in this slide, and I could talk you about them, but instead of that, I will tell you that some of my colleagues call me the auditor. Let's display this information here, man. Yeah, the auditor. And why they and I will tell you more about that name in a video in a few slides later. But first, let me tell you that I'm very honored to have the opportunity to share with all you colleagues at the ISACA Lisbon annual conference. Yeah, so we're going to talk about this conference called Cybersecurity Under Stress, along with Audit with Success. And we will analyze what activities the cybersecurity experts are working on right now, and what considerations should have the auditors in mind to help them to together achieve the organization's goals. So let me tell you that 2 months ago, I brought some groceries to my mother's place. And when I was coming back to my home, it was at night, it was raining, and I fell into a pothole in the road and I get a flat tire. I decided not to wait to the insurance company, and I started to change the tire myself. So I was there struggling with my tire, and then one car pulls over and two guys descend from the vehicle, and they asked me, "Hey man, do you have a problem with your car?" And I was just to say, "Yes, man." And they interrupt me and say, "Okay, give me your wallet and cell phone." They robbed me. They robbed me that right there. Those criminals didn't stop because I was in a difficult time. I was struggling there with my tire. On the contrary, they took advantage of that. That is exactly what the cyber criminals are doing right now in the cyberspace. They are taking advantage of what organizations are trying, of the organizations that are trying to stay operational, and maybe they have weakened some of their controls as their threat detection capabilities, and they use that as an opportunity to attack us. So in the ISACA study of the impact of COVID in cybersecurity areas, 92% responded that they expect to receive a cyber attack in this lockdown period. So we are going to talk about these two control areas, its challenges, and how they can help each other during this crisis period to help our organization to achieve their goals. But first, let me explain you quickly what is this auditor thing going up there. Because in some slides ahead, I will make a little difference to that character. The auditor is how some of my colleagues know me, because 2 years ago, I gave a conference, a talk with that name. And basically, in that talk, I explained that the auditor is the traditional auditor, but on steroids, with soft and hard skills reinforced. With that said, let's move on to our next slide. So this is the agenda that we are seeing today. This is the main topics that we are going to talk about. But let's go better to each section, right? First one, the old normal, because because we are now in the new normal, there must has been an old normal, right? So we are going to see what we was doing there before the pandemic. What we were doing as a cybersecurity. This is the definition of cybersecurity by ISACA, and mainly what it says is that as a cybersecurity area, we were working hard on the development of controls that help us to protect the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of our information systems. And how we do all that? Working on the development of strategies, training people, working on resilience strategies and activities, hardening our platforms, and establishing data classification streams. And in general, we were working hard in activities related to the 5 tasks for information for protection of information assets that are defined by the NIST. These are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from cyber attacks. And what we were doing as an audit, this is the definition of audit of the IIA, and mainly what it says is that basically we were working in confirm the existence of effective controls to protect the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of our information assets, and assuring that information assets create value for the organization. And how we do all that? Evaluating the application controls, the IT general controls, the IT processes, the cybersecurity process, for example, and reviewing important IT projects. And also, we were interviewing and working all the time, side to side, with people who plan, develop, implement, test, use, and abuse of technology. Yeah, all that we were doing. But what we probably didn't do, in this slide, you can see some of the activities that perhaps as an audit or as a cybersecurity areas, we did not do before the current crisis. We are going to see only a few of them, and the idea is that you keep this presentation as a working paper that allows you to analyze all this information. Well, as an audit, perhaps we had no cybersecurity audit planned for this year. In fact, the IIA tells us that 30% of the audit areas globally had no cybersecurity audits planned for this year, for the 2020. And as a cybersecurity, maybe we didn't see the audit area as an ally. Rather than that, we see them like a necessary evil that exists there in our organizations. And neither of both areas secure or monitor the critical vendors or the use of the shadow IT technologies. And maybe as an audit, we do not build sufficient remote audit capabilities. And as a cybersecurity, maybe we do not implement endpoint protection to protect wherever our data is. That is to protect our endpoints both at work and at home office environment. And which is one thing that we all fail to protect. Yes, you are correct. The pandemic scenarios. Yeah, maybe we had that scenario documented in our BCP procedures, but we didn't have it well tested, simulated, and verified in real life situations. In my presentations, I keep asking for the autograph of whoever who has it fully tested, because man, I really want to meet that person. So let's move on to our next section, when auditing wasn't enough, or rather, when just auditing wasn't enough. The 0 day. The 0 day is how I like to call it, to that date in the first trimester of this year, when in our jobs they told us to go to work to our houses. I remember that one day my boss came to my office and said, Arnulfo, from now on you are not going to work here. What? No, man, you are not going to work here in your office. You are not going to work from your home. Oh, all right, man. So I grab everything I will need to work from home: papers, books, pens, information, reports, etc. And when I got home that day, it was a Friday afternoon. That day I did not open my laptop. But the following day, I opened my laptop, and what do I realize? Man, I forgot my laptop charger, man, my AC adapter. I just have a couple of things to remember, and I forgot one of the most important things for me. Now, let's imagine the organizations, all the controls that they must consider to go to work in a teleworking scheme. It's very likely that they forgot to activate some control. Now, let's see if the areas of cybersecurity are really under stress. As you can see here in this slide, there is a lot of activities in what cybersecurity experts are working right now. Just to mention a few, we can see activities related to addressing the increased risk in the remote work environments in the physical and the technical plane. They are working in applying adaptations needed to update the BCP plans and procedures. They are working on activities to identify and controlling the use of the shadow IT, like the use of Zoom tools, for example. They are updating and patching endpoints that have not connected to the internal network in a long time. And they have to do all these activities with less budget and less staff, and with more regulations on the top. So, yeah, man, these guys are really under stress, but they are not alone. They can ask for help to other control departments like the IT department. But before like the IT department, like the IT audit department, but before audit can help them, this department must take in consideration the following things. The first one consideration that has to take in mind the auditors is the relation of the audit task and the crisis. This is when the crisis appeared, a relationship was created between the crisis itself and the audit tasks. As the crisis grew, the attentions to the audit departments dropped down. And that is why the audit areas must learn to be self-sufficient in some of their tasks and develop their analytical and continuous auditing skills to keep working in these days. So Another thing that the auditors have to take in mind is the reduced audit resources. Uh, at the time when the crisis occurred, the lockdown, the attention to the audit areas decreased, and their operational budget and their staff also decreased too. Right now, this reduction does not affect too much to the audit areas because there are several audits that are not being executed right now, especially those audits that involve traveling, but the decreases exist and will soon affect the auditing function. And what is another thing that the auditors have to take in mind? The new risks that emerge. Oh, the cybersecurity and continuity risks that emerge. Arnulfo, are those risks new? No, man, they are not new. They already existed, but they increased. They increased a lot when we send our people or our workforce to work from home. How important is cybersecurity risk in these days? Well, the World Economic Forum did a study in which they surveyed companies to identify the 10 risks or concerns that they had in the pandemic. The top 3 concerns they mentioned was number 1, the impacts of the global economic recession. The number 2, that their companies go to bankruptcy. And what do you think is the number 3? Yeah, you're right, to be victims of cyber attacks. And we already talked about the risk related to business continuity. And basically, they refer to the fact that very few companies had well-tested and simulated pandemic scenarios. And another thing that the auditors should consider is to how can audit help the other areas of controls, and under what conditions audit can do it. And this can be seen using the model of the 3 lines of the IIA, previously called the 3 lines of defense. They are no longer called lines of defense because, according to the IIA, the protection activities should not only be reactive, but they also has to be proactive. So in the old normal, we all had our role defined, all our roles well defined and accepted in every lines, in the 1 and the 2 and 3. But when the crisis appeared, the lines began to get mixed. This is because lines and 1 and 2 began to merge in some activities. They started to ask for help to the line 3 audit in this case. But it is possible for the line 3 to help the line 1 and the line 2. The answer to that is yes, it's possible, but only considering at least these 3 safeguards. The first one, a rule already known by the auditors: limit your scope to advise and not to implement any control. This means that you can help advising on how to make a policy, for example, but you cannot make it or implement it. And the second one, if use different teams to support the administration and to execute future audits. If I have 4 auditors in my team, and the company needs me to assign 2 of my auditors to help them in continuity activities, for example, I can do it. But in the future audits, these 2 auditors cannot participate in the evaluation of that process for at least 1 year. And the tier 1, we must postpone and reschedule reviews of processes in which we have participated, this until the administration take control of that process. Normally, that happens 1 year after our participation. And finally, here is a super fact for those responsible for cybersecurity areas or any other control area. If you need that the auditors help you in some of your activities, yes, they can. Yes, they can do it. And in fact, they must do it. Our friends, the auditors, cannot excuse themselves using the principles of their objectivity and their independence. They must take the necessary safeguards and then help us or help the organization in any task needed when they are required. This is because audit exists to help the organization to achieve their goals. And the first thing that the auditors have to do to help is to recalibrate their audit plan and to align themselves with cybersecurity and other control areas. They have to reschedule, postpone, cancel, and create new audits if necessary. One audit that is very common to execute in these days is the BCP Agile audit. And something very important that the auditor should also do is to consider extending the deadline of the remediation dates of their medium and low risk findings. And of course, all these, they have to report it, or they have to report any judgments to their plans and their findings to the audit committee, as well as any other relevant aspects. And as an auditors, we must update our audit plans to take into account current needs of the audit department, like the right to recording some of the audit entries, for example, and add any necessary guidance to the execution of the agile approaches in our audit plans. And also, we have to implement an assurance map approach to complement the activities of the different control areas so that together they can cover a greater amount of risk. Along with all this, making all this, we already recalibrate and align our audit function with other control areas. But we continue to working remotely, right? Now what? So now is the perfect time to use our remote auditing skills and to start to auditing from home, right? So these are some of the audit tasks that we can do to help the lines 1 and 2 as an audit function. To carry out this task, we must use these 4 resources that we have here. First, we have to evolve from the execution of the walkthroughs to the execution of the talkthroughs, in which using tools such as video conferencing, we can remotely go through the different processes and obtain the necessary evidence of them to support our reviews. And then we can use or we can develop our continuous audit capabilities based in our analytic tools. With all these resources, we will be able to execute all these audit tasks that we see here. And as I commented previously, we will review just a couple of them, and the idea is that you have all this information and material for your reference later in this presentation. So let's review the first one. Identify new single points of failure. In the old normality, organizations had between 5 to 10% of their employees working remotely. During the crisis, organizations sent between 60 to 17% of their employees to work remotely. That means that if a VPN concentrator fails, that amount of employees will be disconnected, or at least they will be working without security. Also, we have to perform teleworking control environment reviews, checking that all endpoints have protection in their storage and in data transmissions, as well as they have remote wiping capabilities, and execute a VPN assignation audit to review the joiners, the movers, and the leavers of the organization. It also important that we help the organization to identify the relief clauses in the contracts with his vendors, so it can be used if necessary. Some example of these relief clauses can be the liability limitations, discounts and no penalties for early terminations, and cybersecurity, cyber insurance considerations. These are some of the audit tasks that we should be doing to help the other control areas. And well, after the crisis, we have to come to the restart and the evolution of the control areas. And to do that, let's say that in the past, the companies value more the being there than the doing something. Now, in the new normal, the companies will value more the doing something than the being there. So after the crisis, we must take these considerations into account. Just to mention a few of them, we must maintain the momentum of what we have been doing well. We have to continue work aligned with other areas until stabilization, and we have to return to their normal condition all the relaxed controls that we applied during the crisis. For example, password reset thresholds and complexity, disable all the previously enabled USB ports, adjust the duration of the VPN accounts assignations, uninstall any special software that we used during the crisis. All these are the things that we must consider in order not only to survive the crisis, but also to prosper after the crisis. And last but not least, we will need an antivirus for our control areas. And for that, I present to you the doctor's prescription for the assurance function. And first of all, we need to apply an assurance map between the control areas to cover as many risks as possible, because the strategic alignment between control areas like audit and cybersecurity is more important than ever. And in this slide, or this prescription of the doctor, you can download very useful information. You can download everything the audit needs to know about COVID. You can download a compendium of the risk of all businesses processes related to COVID, areas like purchasing, H&R, AT, production, you name it. And you can find also too a detailed document with the safeguards that must be taken into account so that the audit function can help other control areas without compromise their independence. And you can download 3 presentations where you can review about topics related to shadow IT, IT audit, and how to audit artificial intelligence. And if the HS persists, take this treatment and call me in the morning. And remember, colleagues, this crisis will pass, and using coordinate approaches, the control areas will be the first in the class. Thank you.